Welcome to Empire Building. I'm Wendy Papazan, and together with my 4 co-hosts, we bring you weekly unfiltered conversations about leadership, growing a big empire, and living on your own terms.
I'm Kimber Leviman-Keaty. We are investors and wealth builders with over $75 million in combined net worth.
I'm Sarah Reynolds. We are visionaries who built more than 50 businesses with over $122 million in annual revenue.
I'm Tiffany Fikes. We've led thousands of people and do it all while being pretty good moms.
And I'm Seychelle Van Poole. We are your podcast to learn how to build big businesses and even bigger lives.
Hi, everybody. It's Tiffany and Wendy, and I am so excited on this winter day to be talking about something that can warm our hearts: money.
And look how cute we look in our little matching sweaters, too.
I know.
We got our little cozy, fun sweaters on. Yeah, so fun.
So we are going to spend some time unpacking a little bit of our financial journey, Wendy and I, specifically around the concept of financial freedom, because it's a topic we get a lot of questions about. It's not something that you're chatting about on the playground with people usually. And so we wanted to make space here for a good in-depth conversation about financial freedom, how we got there, and help you and inspire you on your journey as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be raw and unfiltered, and so we're so excited to make it happen. And as I was thinking about this episode, Tiffany, I don't know if you remember, but during COVID, so it probably would have been in maybe 2021, I'm not sure.
I think it was 2021.
21?
Or maybe it was 2020. I don't know.
Maybe it was 2020. I can't remember, but it was COVID times, and I knew that Jay, my husband Jay, was going to be interviewing Tiffany on the subject of, I think it was wealth, financial freedom, becoming wealthy, whatever that looked like. And I was watching her on the screen with Jay, with several people on my team. We'd all sort of gathered in front of a TV at this place that we had rented. And you introduced yourself and you said, "Hi, I'm Tiffany Fikes from, Nashville or whatever you do. I run the Fikes Group and I am financially free." And there was a long pause after it. And I freaked out. I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Oh, baller. I can't believe she just said that in front of 10,000 people or however many people were watching that year." And, now that I've heard you say that a bunch of times, I guess I'm used to it. But I just thought that was so brave. So kudos to you.
I mean, that's the very first time that I had done that. And it wasn't the first time that it was true, but it was the first time that I made it a part of an introduction. And it was so uncomfortable to say. But it's opened up more and more conversations about this, that, this is just like anything. You just start talking about it, and then you find more people who experience it, and you're calling others out into their greatness when you're brave enough to tell your story. And I remember the time, it was probably the next year at the Her Best Life event, where when we got to our wealth building section, we asked anyone in the audience who was financially free to stand up. And it wasn't like half the audience, but it was a handful of women.
It was a lot. I feel like it was over 10. It was over 10 to 15. Sure. Yeah, 20 people in that room of a couple hundred. And it was a powerful moment for everybody else to look around that room and think wow, this is possible.
Yeah.
This is truly, truly possible.
Yeah.
2 really exciting moments. So anyway, I just thought it would be fun for us to kind of interview each other. Tiffany and I have a pretty similar mindset, I think, on a lot of things. And if I recall your kind of early story, the way you grew up, because wasn't your dad an accountant?
Yes, my dad's an accountant.
Yeah. So you got a pretty good head start in some ways, but not in all the ways. So maybe you can share with everybody about what it was like growing up with your dad.
Yeah. So I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. My dad was actually an accountant for an oil company, which sounds like really lucrative, except in the 80s and the 90s, the oil collapsed and, it was hard times. So I didn't grow up with money, but I grew up with a dad who understood how money works. And so we were made to buy all of our things ourselves. I mean, there's the only way we could do it. But they gave us an allowance. And I've gone back and asked them about this because they were like, we didn't have money for an allowance. You couldn't get an allowance and us buy you clothes. So we gave you an allowance and told you you needed to buy your clothes because we wanted you to learn how to deal with money correctly.
Do you remember how much you got?
Oh, it was very little. I mean, I'm talking about $1, and then we earned, I can still see the chart. My mom made a chart of chores, and it was like a nickel if you did the dishwasher, 25 cents if you folded the laundry. But she bonused us if we filled every box on the chart.
Oh.
Yeah, so you got paid according to what you did.
Yeah, that messes you up as a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, so smart.
Anyway.
Genius mother.
Oh, yeah, my mom is very smart. So I would end up with maybe like $250 a week, something like that.
But to be fair, I know it 250 doesn't sound like a lot, but it did, like I remember putting like 50 cents worth of gas in my car at one time in high school,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I remember some friends would come over, and the other thing that we had to buy was like treats. So like my mom would go to Sam's and buy things in bulk, and then we would buy the gum at cost from her. So like this is what I mean. We got an allowance, but
Wow.
the allowance was for our treats and like things like that. We weren't going to
You
play
didn't have to pay
video
for
games.
your food, though. You didn't have to buy dinner for yourself every night.
But I remember when that friend came over, I said, "Do you want some gum?" And she was like, "Sure." And then I was like, "Let me get some money." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, "It's a nickel. It's a nickel. I'll get us some gum." And that was the first time I had that.
Yeah.
Oh, this isn't normal.
This is weird. Yeah. Did your friends know that? I mean, was it weird, or was it like, did it continue like into high school when you got older and all of that? Like when your friends came over, you had to like prepay the snacks, or I'm just curious, like how that played out.
I'm trying to think in high school. By high school, I was teaching piano and had my own income. So like I wasn't beholden to the chore chart anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't have memories of that in high school, but I did have to pay for everything. My parents would match my money for clothes. So if I saved up to $100 for school clothes, they'd give me another $100, and then I'd have $200 to go buy all my clothes for the year.
Buy your Jordache jeans.
Yeah. Oh, I wish. No, Jordache.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, probably not Jabot. I wanted Jabot, but I couldn't have it. But, that mentality of you get some money, here's your $2.50. How much are you going to save and how much are you going to give away was immediately a part of the conversation for us. So while I didn't have a head start in actual money or wealth building experience, I did have some like financial wherewithal and smarts with money that I think helped me. But we'll talk about when it started hurting me also.
Well, and it's possible to have an upbringing like that and still come out poor. I know people who've actually kind of rebelled from that and just was like, I want to just spend all the money that I make. So why do you think you kept with it?
I think I'm just so practical. Like, it just makes sense. Why would I do that? I remember when Joshua, who's my husband now, when he was in college and he bought a t-shirt for $100. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, why would you spend $100? I could do so much with $100. It just didn't make sense to me. It didn't connect. And so I think it's just the practicality of the way my brain works.
What was on that t-shirt? Do you remember?
Oh, we still have it.
Well, I figured. I was like, Josh, in my mind, I'm thinking Joshua still has it.
For sure, he still has it. Almost just as a an icon of the moment I realized people just spent money on things that they wanted. It was a new concept for me.
I love it. We'll put a picture of that t-shirt in the show notes.
Yeah, that's right. We'll work on it. I'll try to get him to put it on.
Yeah. Well, my upbringing was, I think, pretty typical. We never really talked about money. I had one grown-up whose parents had grown up in the Depression, especially my grandmother was super thrifty. She was in the Midwest in the Dust Bowl, very, very poor. She was on a farm. She actually worked the farm with my great-grandmother and her 8 younger brothers. So they were just very poor. There's no other way to describe it, at least monetarily. And so my grandmother just grew up with that mentality, and that ran down to my dad. So save everything, every used pantyhose, big bags of used pantyhose, anything that could be sort of useful in the
Yes.
future. Eventually later, my grandparents and us had these two like little cabins, two like little trailers on a lake in Minnesota. And I remember very clearly my grandmother walking up from the lake one day and finding like a little piece of metal. I don't even know what it was. Didn't sort of look like a washer, but not really. And I just remember observing her from a distance, her picking it up, obviously seeing value in it. Most people would just toss it. And following her, she went inside and she put it in a drawer. She kept it. And I just remember, yeah, that is her core. Like everything has value. And, she and I would cook together, and I still do this to this day. Like I make a cake and like that bowl is clean. There's not batter in that bowl left. Like I'm, scraping it clean. And that just like comes straight from her because you didn't want to waste anything. And then that compared with my mom, who grew up wealthier. She grew up in California. Her dad was an entrepreneur. And she kind of grew up in an environment with her mom where spending translated into love. So I had one parent where kind of like saving was almost love, and then one where spending was love. And I'm pretty sure my parents never did like the love languages. I'm sure that like never came up between the two of them. So they were constantly fighting about money. And, my mom always wanted to spend more and do more and buy a bigger house and get a boat and all this kind of stuff. And my dad was like, no, 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 no. So I ended up just becoming more like my dad with like kind of a scarcity mentality, that like sort of depression era. There's not enough. Everything needs to be saved. I'm always thrift store shopping, which is totally fine. I still do it, actually. It's funny. I talk to people and I'm like, oh, I was out thrift store shopping. People are like, whoa, that's crazy. You're a multimillionaire. I'm like, no, it's really fun, And also this ethos of like not wasting anything. I do feel like so many things are wasted. So that's one of the other fun things about vintage. So that's kind of where I got my thinking from was of course my mom and my dad. So,
well, let's define financial freedom, and then we can jump into, okay, how'd we get from there to here? So financial freedom means you have passive income, which means you don't have to work for the money, that supports your lifestyle and goals. And when I first got introduced to the concept of like financial independence, it's different. I would say financial freedom is different. There's this whole like FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early. That was how we first got introduced to the concept of it, was how young can you retire? Like how little can you live on such that you can get there as fast as possible? And financially free means you can fund your mission, you can fund the life you want with your passive income, not just scrimp and save and ride. Like the guy we learned from first, I can't think of his name, but like he rides a bike.
Yeah.
Does not drive because that's a waste of money driving. Like that concept of there's a finite amount of resources, you need to live on the least and stop working as soon as you get to that point. So financial freedom is thinking a little bit bigger and a little bit more abundantly minded.
Well, and so I think for you, it was much more like, this is a goal. We want to be financially free. We're going to make it happen early. How did that come about for you?
I've tried to think about that because I can't quite figure it out. There's one thing. So I had an uncle who was wealthy, and he retired when he was 45. I mean, like that blew my mind. I didn't even know that was a thing that you could do. And I don't know where that got seated in my mind, but I think that's part of it. Like, if he could do that, I wonder if I could do that.
Was that your number, 45, or was it a little earlier?
40 was the number that I set out. I said, I want to retire, because at that point, that's what I said. I wanted to retire whenever I'm 40, because I want to be able to do whatever I want with my kids. Like I want to be a present when they're still at home. Mm-hmm. And so I think that played into it a little bit. This man that I didn't know any of his details. I didn't know how much money he had. I just knew he had done this. So it must be possible. And I have this uncanny ability to believe that anything's possible. And so seeing, oh, someone's done that, then I know I can. And I bet I could do it a few years earlier. So I'm sure that played into it. And then Joshua really got into this financial independence concept that I had never heard of before. And so he actually brought that to us.
Because that would have been quite early in that movement. Because this was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you guys were met, like that was very early in that fire.
2008.
Yeah. So almost 20 years. Yeah.
That's how we got the concept of it, was the guy on the bike. And when I'm like, oh my gosh, we could do this even earlier if we save. Because that is the one thing about my upbringing. Like, I know how to save, scrimp, and like go without. And so when we started in real estate, we just never changed our lifestyle in the pursuit of this goal.
Well, and I think we came about it in a slightly different way, although with a similar result. So I came to the marriage with kind of that thrifty mindset like that you did. And Jay, I think, had a little bit more abundant mindset. But our goal was really to grow our net worth, which is kind of what you're talking about. And, you know, we set these big goals for ourselves at about age 30. So we were quite a bit older. So we had lived in New York. I loved my 20s. I had so much fun. I traveled around the world 2 times. I lived in New York. We moved to Austin, got married, all the things. And then I think when Jay started working at Keller Williams, we got introduced to this idea of like tracking your net worth. And that's really what propelled us. And a few years after we started tracking, we came up with these big goals, which was $75,000 in passive income, a net worth of $1 million was our 10-year goal, and then 10 rental properties. So like we never really had this idea of like we want to be financially independent, but kind of we did. Like it's weird because that was really the goal behind that $75,000 in passive income, because at the time we thought, yeah, based on how thrifty we are, we can easily live on $75,000 a year if everything is paid off, which actually is not that hard to do. You know, if you got all your debt paid off, it's pretty easy.
Well, and it informed the decisions because that was the thing that we wanted. We needed passive income as quickly as possible. So it informed most of our investing. So we went from you max out your IRA or your Roth or, you know, whatever retirement.
Well, you already had all those things, right? You'd started that very early.
Yeah. I mean, I was saving for my Roth. Like when I started teaching piano when I was 15, my dad was immediately like, okay, and this is how much you should put into retirement
you were
every
like,
year.
Should I get that gum or from my mom or should I just dump it into my Roth?
And my dad's like, Roth, do the Roth. So we kind of had to shift our entire investment strategy because it was no longer what's the maximum return I can get over my lifetime with this money. It is how can I turn this into passive income as quickly as possible. And I was not raised, I mean, shout out to Keller Williams. Like this would not have been possible without what I learned from Keller Williams.
1,000%.
Because no one had rental property. I am weird in my family for how I've invested my money.
Not just in your family.
Right. Also in the world. But I learned this way, like, oh, you can buy properties that are paying you every month. And if you save fast enough, you can even pay cash for them, which is not the biggest return on your money, but it gets you the fastest passive income immediately. And so that being our goal, we invested differently than had our goal been make the most money, have the biggest net worth, or use this money to the maximum of what it is, which is my normal MO. So I had to relearn, nope. It is a cash-on-cash return that you are interested in right now. What it's worth in 40 years does not matter to you. It doesn't help you get to your goal.
Yeah, I think we had kind of we were gunning for the net worth versus the income. Yeah. And so that was really the most important thing to us because I feel like we were making decent money and we were both working and we were starting these kind of businesses on the side. And honestly, it was random. I think it was just we kept upping the goal a little bit every year. And that kind of putting pressure on increasing the goal just forced us to do and try different things. And, as a result, we have 12 properties, 6 businesses, giant chunk of money in the stock market, and lots of other like side investments and things like that. But is it sometimes hard for you to believe that you are where you are? I mean, is there I know you worked really hard for it, but do you sometimes wake up and be like, this is crazy?
Yeah, and it comes mostly from also fear, like, oh, what if something happens? What if I've done my math wrong?
So when that happens, what do you do? Okay, so I know that happens a lot. And I know, like, for instance, you had that big situation with your apartment where you had to shell out, like, you told me $85,000. Like, what's going through your head when something like that happens?
So, yeah, I remember telling you that story because it was the first time that I didn't worry about writing that check. It was just like we had a debacle. We were underinsured. It was a horrible situation. It should have been covered by insurance. We discovered in the middle of it that there was going to be no insurance and we had to fit the bill. But we had the money. And I knew we had the money. And I knew the math was good. And I knew that why we wanted this apartment and what it was for our family and what it meant for our family was worth every penny. And so I could write that check without weight. It wasn't just like, okay, I got to go back and I got to do all my recalculations and make sure that everything's going to be okay. It was like, no, like this is what we're doing and it's going to be fine, even if the math doesn't add up, because I believe and have experienced that whatever is supposed to happen, you'll be taken care of. And there were times when I had no money and the math didn't add up. Like I shouldn't have been able to pay my bills, but I could. Like somehow everything got paid. And so bringing that forward into, I'm not in charge of all of this. Have I worked really hard for this money? Absolutely. Though, is that what I'm putting my faith in? Is it the money that I'm putting my faith in? Very easily, you could say yes, but the reality is that isn't. It isn't, and I know that it'll be fine. But when you get into scarcity mindset, which you and I were raised with, you can very quickly get back to, I got to recalculate.
Yeah, well, you moved from a scarcity to like a faith-based, it's like there's a bigger picture there and God's in control, I think is what I hear you saying.
That's it, but you always have this, I don't know, what if I've done, or at least I always have this, what if I've done the math wrong?
Yeah. Which
leads us to a great book that you recommended to me, Die with Zero. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, my hero, Bill Perkins. Bill, if you're out there, put me on your Austin Fun list. Such a good book, Die with Zero. And it's just this idea of, so Bill Perkins, who's the author, lives in Austin. He's made a lot of money in the finance world. He's oil and gas trader or something like that. And at a certain point in his life, he decided to stop optimizing for money and start optimizing for fulfillment, personal fulfillment. And all the things that are taken into account with personal fulfillment is, of course, wealth, health, and then time. So it's kind of those things that we always talk about, that it's a finite amount. We have a finite amount of money, we have a finite amount of time, we have a finite amount of health. And he just talks about, he gives examples like, so Tiffany, if I was to say to you, or I was really to say to anyone, hey, would you trade, if you're, let's say 20 years old, or even our age, would you trade places with Warren Buffett?
Everybody says no.
Everybody says no. Why?
Because he's 80, 90 or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. He's in his 90s now, and Charlie Munger just died. And so nobody would do that, right? So that goes to kind of like this sort of idea of there's only a finite amount of health that you can have. We're only going to be around for a certain amount of time. And so Bill Perkins just really shifted my mindset. Instead of just like piling up your money into infinity at a certain point, which for me, right, I'm 53, and actually he advocates that your net worth should be peaking. And he gives the data, like most people's net worth peaks like well into their 70s. And he just talks about kind of this old idea of, I'm going to pass all this money on to my kids. But, the reality is, when I die, my kids are going to be in their 70s maybe, in their 60s or 70s, and they're going to need it's way more beneficial to give one of my kids $10,000 to buy a house now than to give them $100,000 when they're 75, right? So it's just really shifted my mind. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, and he also like debunks the myth of not enough, like you're not going to have enough, that you need to save this up so you're not a burden potentially. That was part of the like most transformative part to me with the chapters about that, where he's like, you can never have enough if something catastrophic happens. Literally, it's not possible. You're going to, in a week, $1 million can be gone.
Yeah, his dad spent, $30,000 a day in the hospital at the end. If you're in the hospital for 30 days, boom.
If that's your goal, if that's why you're not helping your kids buy a house when they're 25, like, you're never going to have enough. And so you're going to have wasted that experience and fulfillment and all of that. So that concept was fascinating.
And he also talks about the ability to buy insurance for that. So if you're worried about long-term care, buy long-term care insurance.
Yeah.
Like if you're worried about not having a nice place to live when you're an old person, well, there's insurance for that. And he basically says like, hey, an actual insurance agent is going to be way better at figuring that out than you are. You're not going to be able to like figure that amount out. You're not going to know when you're going to die.
We're not all actuaries. We can't all just do the math on that.
We're not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think the other thing that was really affirming was the concept of your dollar per fun, or he would probably say dollar per fulfillment, is less when you're young. And so, you traveled the world twice, and you did it not in bougie hotels. You did it in hostels.
Yeah. $6 a day in Egypt.
Joshua and I went to Europe. We're there for 6 weeks, couch surfing. We slept on the dorm floor of a college student in Rome, and had an amazing time. I would never sleep on the dorm floor of a kid in Rome anymore. And so to have this like really fulfilling, amazing experience now in my 40s or in your 50s, you got to spend a whole lot more money to do that. And so everything in life shouldn't just be about accumulation. And I think that's a fun part of our story too, is both of ours, is we did some of that stuff. We quit our jobs and went to Europe for 6 weeks as adults. We were not just straight out of college. We were 28, 29. We'd saved up the money and we just left and did it. And you traveled and lived in New York.
We did the same thing. Yeah, same with Jay and I. After we got married, we went and spent 4.5 months. We had a 4.5-month honeymoon.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've just never heard somebody validate that.
I know. Well, and it's like, what did we really miss? It's not like we're 4.5 months behind all of our peers. No.
Right.
And what we gained from it was exponential personal fulfillment,
Yeah. And, I made fun of my parents for making me buy gum and stuff and my clothes, but I also went on vacations. That was not, Joshua bought his $100 shirts, but never went on vacations. So my parents prioritized experiences. And so my dad would have some work conference he had to go to, and my mom would make it into this crazy road trip. We drove from South Texas to Washington, D.C. and stopped along the way. And we went to Yellowstone one year. And so they spent their money on that instead of on things for us. And so that was modeled in my childhood too. And so I just loved a book on wealth building that validated that part of who we are too.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Well, if we can just switch topics for a little bit, because I know you and I both have struggled with this, which is, what you there won't get you here. And you and I both we've talked about, all of our weird scarcity mindset, thrifty quirks, this idea of scraping out all the batter or reusing baggies or feeling like tissues. To me, it's oh my gosh, still. Okay, I'm a multimillionaire. I use a tissue. I'm woohoo, it's not toilet paper. You know what I mean? It's a little thrill. And so how do you go from that? Because that's a hard habit to break, that thrifty I like to call it thrift versus scarcity, although it is both. Like, how have you overcome that?
I mean, it is still like I got Asher's Christmas present on sale and got to the store and there was another discount and it still made me joyful. And like when I can find something at the thrift store that I love, it makes me joyful. So I still get joy from it. And I've stopped feeling bad about that because it's fun for me, whatever.
It's fun. Yeah. Because I think also, like, for you and I both, like, the opportunity costs of that money are always in the forefront of our minds. And most people don't think of that. Like, after I traveled around the world and I moved to New York City, the only thing I wanted to do is save up money and get back out there and go traveling. And so for me, my friends were buying handbags or even buying fancy drinks at restaurants or going out to eat. And I was like, well, a handbag plus 2 dinners out plus this is a plane ticket to Italy, and I know you think that way as well. And
yeah, it really comes to you have to get to the opportunity cost of your time is what I had to remind myself, yes, I can wash this baggie and I still want to because it's how I was raised. But that time that I spend washing this baggie out, I could be doing something else, like my dollar per hour concept of my time is more valuable than my money now. And so I've got to make sure that I'm aligning that. And it still takes Joshua sometimes going, Tiffany, the time. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Tell us something recent like that.
I mean, he did this recently, and I'm trying to think what I was doing. I can't remember it exactly, but I'm sure it had something to do with Christmas presents, where I was like spending time price checking things and figuring out where I could get the best deal on something. Yeah. And he was like, I'm going to need you to be done with that. Like you're wasting time and the time you're spending and saving $20 is not worth it. So just constantly reminding yourself, like you're spending time or money. And you've got to decide which one's more valuable to you. And at a certain point in your life, no matter how much money you have, your time is more valuable than your money is. So I think we're sort of crossing over that threshold of time is more important.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is really hard to just keep that at the forefront because all of our money habits, they're all habituated. And if you're not taking the time to think about them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, then you're just going to be doing the same old thing. I mean, 70% of what we do every single day, 80% of all the thoughts we have every single day, this is exactly the same as yesterday. And so if you're not putting something new in your brain, then it's just going to be the same old thing. And I know for me, what's been really powerful is just to surround myself with people who do think differently. They think bigger, they're abundance-minded. And I know our circle, our girl gang, has helped me a lot in some of that thinking. And I know just you sharing some of your things has been really helpful for me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I feel so lucky, I feel so lucky to have had such a financial journey with you. So we're like, how long? 13 years now or something like that. We've known each other.
Yeah,
so
it's crazy.
Yeah, what a gift.
Well, I would just encourage everybody to think about money. And you don't need to have financial freedom as your goal. Like, what is the thing that is your goal? What is the thing that you want your life to look like? Because, when we talk about building a big business, you build a big business to have an impact, to make money, to create the life that you want. All those things go together. And if you're not being intentional about what that life is that you want and how your money can get you there, you're going to miss out on some of that time that you'll never get back. So as you're spending time this beginning of the year thinking about what do I want my business to look like, think about what do you want your finances to look like? What are those goals? And what are the habits you need to break or create that will get you there? Because I know for Wendy and I both, we've had to break habits and create new ones.
Absolutely.
So make sure that you're intentional.
Well, guys, what a great session today. Tiffany, thanks always for being real and for paving the way for all of us. Because, here at the Empire Building Podcast, we want financial freedom for you guys. We want you to go out there and build a business so that it can fund your perfect life. So go out there and do that. And don't forget to, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and leave a 5-star rating and review. We read all of them and we so appreciate it. So bye, guys.
Thanks. Have a great week.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information.